They say the desert don't care if you arrive with diamonds or dust on your boots. But Larkspur Crossing sure had opinions. The July sun clung to the bone, and the wooden platform at the train depot hissed beneath it like a cast-iron skillet left too long. The townsfolk leaned lazy against the station rails, squinting through the heat shimmer, mouths twisted into shapes better fit for judgment than conversation. Eli Boone stood beneath the overhang shade, chewing a sliver of jerky that had gone stiff in his pocket. He had no business waiting there. Not really. His saddle leather shipment was late, and the town gave him little else to linger for. Still, something in the dry wind kept him rooted. Perhaps it was boredom. Perhaps instinct. Maybe even memory. The train came in screaming, a long, metallic howl that made dogs bark and mothers tug children close. Dust rose in spirals around the iron wheels as they hissed to a stop, and the silence that followed was expectant, hungry. She stepped off like a porcelain figurine wrapped in traveling clothes. Lace gloves, cream-colored skirt, hat pinned tight against a hopeful breeze. Rosalind Bellamy. Or Rosie, if you knew her after she'd dropped her guard, which no one in Larkspur yet did. She clutched a leather valise like it held every reason she had for crossing 1,000 miles. Her eyes swept the crowd, searching. He stepped forward, all pomp and polished boots. Walter Griggs, son of cattle, money, and privilege, the kind of man who thought affection was something owed. A few townsfolk elbowed each other, whispering already. The engagement had been printed in the St. Louis Gazette, inked in high society's blessing. The lady was meant to marry into wealth, settle on a ranch outside town. It was all but settled, until Walter laughed. It wasn't a nervous chuckle, or the kind of disbelief that loves too hard. No, it was a sneering, cruel laugh, loud enough to slice through the summer heat like broken glass. His friends echoed it, all teeth and mockery. One spat. Another tipped his hat low, muttering, "Well, damn. She really came." Rosie stood still, confusion riding her brow. "Walter," she said. "Just once." Softly. "Lord, I didn't think you'd actually do it," Walter said, swiping sweat from his brow and cocking his hip. "Look at you, all dolled up like Sunday supper. Hell, you look like my mother's china doll." There was a long, cracking pause. Rosie's lips parted, then closed again. Her eyes, painted just so, brimmed with a sheen too proud to fall. But her hands trembled. One tightened over the valise. The other, gloved in cream, reached toward him. He stepped back like she tried to bite. "You wrote me," she said, voice thin but sharp. "You said come. You promised." "Promised." He grinned. "That was before I saw you in person. Don't take it hard, sweetheart. You're just not what I pictured." His boot heels struck the boards as he turned. He mounted his horse, his posse chuckling behind him. They rode off before her tears could drop, before anyone could stop pretending they weren't watching something come apart. The town fell quiet. Then the murmurs began. "She's been catfished by a Griggs, no less. You'd think a St. Louis girl would know better. Poor thing probably pawned everything just to get here." Rosie's knees bent, not all the way to the ground, but enough for defeat to hang in the air like thunder. She sat on her suitcase, hands in her lap, eyes turned toward her boots. Her whole life folded in on itself in that moment. No one moved to help. Eli Boone hadn't said a word. Not when the train pulled in. Not when Walter strutted like a rooster. Not even when Rosie's heartbreak cracked open in the middle of the street. But now, he stepped forward. He didn't offer a smile. That would have been cruel. Instead, he offered her his canteen, the metal worm from his bag. She blinked up at him, face blotched with shame, and hesitated. "Drink," he said. His voice was like gravel under water, low, steady, and made for silence more than speech. She drank. 2 sips. Enough to remember the shape of breath. He nodded once, took the canteen back, and sat beside his suitcase. "Why?" she asked, not looking at him. "Seemed like the right thing," he said, gaze fixed on a distant horsefly circling a hitching post. "Don't mean nothing, Dot." That was a lie, of course. Eli Boone didn't waste words, and he didn't offer comfort for free. But something in the angle of her shoulders, the way she held her sorrow like it was her fault, cut deeper than he'd expected. She didn't cry like someone trying to gather pity. She cried like someone mourning a version of herself she'd once believed in. A boy ran by, chasing a hoop down the dusty street. His mother clucked her tongue, yanked him away from the depot, as if heartbreak could be contagious. "What now?" she whispered, voice frayed. "You got folks back in St. Louis." She shook her head. "Money." Another shake. "Friends." A bitter laugh, choked short. "Only the ones who wanted a wedding invitation." Eli squinted at the sun, then at the horizon beyond town. "Then you're finally free." She blinked, turned her head. He stood, brushed dust from his worn jeans. "Come with me. Ain't far." She didn't move, didn't trust. But trust was a luxury, and she had nothing left to lose. They walked in silence, through the alley behind the mercantile, past the stables, to the crooked door of Widow Melly's boarding house. He knocked, and I peed through the slit. Then the door creaked open. Melly didn't ask questions, just waved Rosie in with a grunt and raised eyebrow. Eli handed over $2 silver. "Week's rent." Rosie's cheeks flushed. "I can't let you." "You're not. I'm just stubborn." He tipped his hat, turned to leave. "Wait," she said, stepping into the doorway. Her face was streaked with sweat, tears, and the grime of travel. But there was something fierce behind her eyes now. "You don't even know me." Eli paused, turned halfway. "Don't have to," he said, "but I saw enough to know you didn't deserve that." She stood a little taller. Not much, just enough. As he walked away, the sun dipped behind the livery roof, casting a long shadow behind him. Rosie remained in the doorway, staring after the man who had offered nothing. No flattery, no future, no comfort beyond a drink and a place to rest. And yet it was the first true kindness she'd been shown in years. From the far end of the street, Walter Griggs watched them both. From his horse, half shaded by a saloon awning, he spat on the ground and narrowed his eyes. Something in his pride had been bruised, and bruises left unattended had a way of rotting into rage. Rosie worked quietly in the shadows of Larkspur Crossing, days passing in the soft rhythm of mended leather and lowered eyes. She earned her keep at the livery, stitching worn saddle blankets, cleaning bridles, learning to move around horses without flinching. Widow Melly gave her no kindness, only space. That, Rosie had learned, was a kind of mercy. The town hadn't softened. Whispers followed her through the mercantile like dust clinging to boots. "She's a fallen lady," some said, "come all the way from St. Louis just to chase a man into shame." When she passed the churchyard, women with parasols clutched them tighter, offering smiles too brittle to mean anything. Children stayed, then mimicked their mothers. Larkspur Crossing never forgot a scandal. It barely tolerated strangers. It never forgave a woman who arrived alone. Still, she rose each morning before the heat, hands blistered and sore, and tied her gloves tight. The gloves were the only thing she'd brought untouched, ivory silk, once pure, now stained at the wrists. But she wore them like armor. Eli Boone didn't speak much after that first day. He'd appear at the livery some afternoons with a quiet nod, sometimes dropping a packet of biscuits wrapped in brown paper. Once, a tin of tea. Once, a dog-eared book of poems. She never saw him deliver these things, only found them on the workbench after he was gone. She didn't thank him, not aloud. But one day, she mended the tear in his coat where the lining had pulled loose and left it hanging neatly from his saddle peg. He touched it once and said nothing. That was enough. At night, Rosie would sit on the porch outside her boarding room and watch him from a distance. How he spoke to horses as if they were kin. How he never raised his voice, not even when the stallion bit his shoulder. He moved like a man who lived with ghosts, like he owed silence a debt he'd never quite repay. It wasn't love, not then, but it was something tender and slow-growing, like a wildflower pushing through rock. Then Walter Griggs returned. He rode in 3 weeks after Rose's arrival, slouched in his saddle like he owned the sky. His face was red from drink, his boots spit-shined. Eli was at the trough, brushing down his gelding, when Walter dismounted in front of him. "Well now," Walter said, tossing his reins to a stable boy. "Didn't expect to see you still breathing, Boone." Eli didn't look up. "Not in the mood," Griggs. Walter stepped closer, crowding the air. "You've been playing nursemaid to my runaway bride." Eli paused. She didn't run. She was pushed. Walter's lip curled. "She's a parasite. Clung to me for a ring. Now sucking on your pity like it's candy." Eli straightened slowly, brushing horsehair from his sleeves. "Get on your horse. You sweet on her?" Walter asked, his voice rising. "Is that it? You think you're gonna be some white knight, save the girl from her shame?" Rosie stepped out from behind the barn wall before Eli could speak. She hadn't meant to listen, but the words pierced through timber like splinters. "I don't need saving," she said. Both men turned. Eli's gaze remained steady, but Walter's darkened. "You got nerve," Walter said, taking a step toward her. "After the embarrassment you caused, you should have left with the next train." Rosie kept her ground. "I came because you asked me. I stayed because I remembered who I was." Walter sneered. "You were nothing but a story to me. A flotation. And now you've turned Boone into a fool." Eli moved between them in one smooth breath, blocking Walter's path. "Leave her be." Walter's hand twitched at his belt. "You gonna stop me? Boone? With what? That quiet look you give folks? Think that scares me?" Eli didn't flinch. His eyes, so often half-lidded and unreadable, were sharp now. "You draw, I shoot. Simple." The street behind them had stilled. Somewhere, a door creaked. A shutter closed. Larkspur Crossing knew the shape of tension, and it tasted like blood before it spilled. Walter's fingers hovered near his revolver, knuckles white. Rosie's breath caught. The heat pulsed in her temples. Then Walter smiled. "You ain't worth the bullets," he said, spitting in the dirt. "But this ain't over." He turned on his heel and walked away, laughter trailing behind him like smoke from a dying fire. Eli exhaled slowly. Rosie stayed at his back, her chest tight. "You didn't have to do that," she said quietly. "Yeah," Eli murmured. "I did." He turned to face her then. Dust coated his shirt, sweat at his brow. But his eyes were calm. "You all right?" Rosie nodded, though her hands shook beneath her gloves. "You shouldn't have stood between us. You shouldn't have had to stand alone." She didn't know what to say to that. No one had ever offered her a place beside them without first naming the cost. A silence stretched between them, the kind that holds weight. And then, like something broken clicking into place, Rosie reached for his hand. Not to hold, just to touch. His skin was rough, calloused, but it was warm, alive. "Why do you care?" she asked. Eli looked down at their hands, then out at the town beyond. The buildings, the dirt, the way everyone had disappeared inside. "Because I know what it feels like," he said, "to be left standing where you thought love was supposed to meet you." That night, Rosie sat on her porch long after the moon had risen, her gloves folded neatly in her lap. Inside, the town whispered of trouble brewing, of old names and young grudges. But outside, beneath the stars, she began to believe that maybe, just maybe, the story she had arrived for was not the one that would define her. And far off, beyond the livery, a window lit up in Eli Boone's cabin. A soft glow in the dark. A sign that someone, somewhere, was still watching. Still willing. Still offering forever, without asking anything in return. The storm came just before dawn, not with thunder or rain, but with broken hinges and the absence of breath. Rosie woke to the metallic stench of Fay. Her window was cracked. On her pillow, something gleamed in the faint light. Cold steel. A knife plunged halfway into the feather down. No note. No message. Just the promise of silence if she didn't know when to leave. Downstairs, Widow Melly sat in her rocker, shotgun across her lap. She didn't ask who Rosie had crossed. "You've got till dusk," she muttered. "Don't want blood in my walls." Rosie stood barefoot in the dirt behind the house, gloves forgotten. Her hands, blistered and calloused, now trembled like porcelain set on edge. She looked across town to the livery, then to the ridge beyond it, where Eli lived alone among his horses and wind. She didn't want to need him, but she did. By the time Eli answered her knock, her breath came in stutters, like wind breaking through dry leaves. She held a knife wrapped in torn pillow cloth. He unwrapped it slowly, eyes narrowing, and then without a word, set a kettle to boil. I thought it was over, she said, her voice frayed. It never is, he replied, handing her a tin cup. Not till you face it head on. She sipped, scalding her tongue, and didn't care. I don't want you in danger. That ship sailed. He sat across from her, arms folded, face unreadable. His cornered. Men like that don't fight fair. Rosie stared at the knife. He won't stop until I run. Eli shook his head. Then we don't run. By midday, word spread. 2 horses gone from the livery, Eli's finest Mustangs. Fence cut. Prints in the dust heading north, toward the canyon trail. A deliberate theft, not a drunken impulse. Larkspur Crossing pretended not to notice. Townsfolk avoided eye contact. They all knew who had the gall to reach for Eli Boone's horses and the cowardice to strike from the dark. Don't, Rosie said as Eli saddled his mare. But his movements were slow, deliberate. He checked every strap, every loop. He took from me, Eli said. And he threatened you. She stepped in front of him. And what will killing him fix? I ain't hunting to kill. I'm going to get back what's mine. Rosie touched his coat, lightly, at the hem. Then let me ride with you. He paused. It's not your fight, but it's my name he's dragging through the dirt. A long silence stretched between them. Then he gave a single nod. They rode out at sundown, just the 2 of them. The trail twisted narrow through mesquite and sandstone, their shadows long and dark against the canyon rim. Coyotes called from somewhere far off. Rosie rode without speaking, her back straight, her heart pounding. She had never followed revenge on horseback before. They found the horses just past the ridge, tied near Dead Oak. Walter waited on foot beside them, bottle in one hand, pistol in the other. He was alone. Well, he said, smiling crooked, ain't this a picture? The saint and the stray. Eli dismounted, slowly. You've got one chance, Griggs. Walter laughed. You forget who my father is. Who owns this land? You're a saddle-worn nobody, and she's a ruined woman. You think you two scare me. Rosie stepped forward. You're scared already. That's why you left the knife. Walter's mouth twitched. That wasn't for you. That was for Boone. He took what was mine. No, Eli said, steady as stone. You threw her away. Walter raised the pistol. Don't preach. She was a toy. She believed in love like it came in a ribbon box. Rosie's voice cut clean through the air. You'll never speak about me again. Walter turned toward her. What are you gonna do? Cry. Her hand moved before thought, not to draw a weapon, but to step between him and Eli. No, I'm going to watch him take back what you stole. Eli stepped into Walter's line of sight, and the world shrank to 2 men and a line drawn in the dust. You pull that trigger, Eli said softly. You'll never draw breath easy again. Walter hesitated. The pistol wavered, and then Eli moved. He didn't reach for his gun. He closed the distance, grabbed Walter's wrist, twisted hard. The bottle fell first. The pistol clattered next. They tumbled together, a burst of limbs and grit and fury. Rosie rushed forward but stopped short as Eli rose from the dust, dragging Walter to his knees. Blood leaked from Walter's nose. He spat, snarling. Go ahead. Finish it. But Eli let go, wiped his hands, turned to Rosie. I said I wasn't gonna kill him. She looked down at Walter, broken, humiliated, still alive. It was worse than death for a man like him. They took the horses and rode back under moonlight. Neither spoke for a long while. The canyon wind was cold against Rosie's face, and her heartbeat stayed high until the town lights glowed ahead like scattered embers. At the edge of town, Eli slowed. You all right? He asked. Rosie nodded. They stopped outside her boarding house. Widow Melly watched from the porch, unmoved. Rosie slid off a horse but didn't step away. She turned to Eli. The moon silvered his cheekbone, his jaw unshaven. Dust and sweat still clung to his shirt. I think I'm staying, she whispered. He searched her face. You sure? I am now. His gaze lingered, quiet, reverent. Then I'll see you in the morning. She reached up, touched the side of his face. You already have. Weeks passed. Larkspur Crossing remained unchanged, suspicious, small-minded, but quieter. Walter left town without farewell. His father sold the ranch, moved north. Gossip faded like old paint. Rosie stayed. She wore her gloves only on Sundays now. Eli built a porch swing on a small house outside town. Rosie painted the windowsills blue. She still stitched leather, and he still rarely spoke, but their silences became sacred, shared. They never said I love you. But sometimes, late at night, she'd rest her head on his shoulder and whisper, "You didn't save me. You waited for me to save myself." And he'd murmur back, "Forever don't rush. It waits." So if you ever find yourself cast out by the world, heart in pieces and pride wearing thin, remember this. Love doesn't always come with fireworks or fanfare. Sometimes, it rides in quiet, waits with gentle hands, and offers you forever, not as a promise, but as a place to rest.